Who is calling in on the number ending 4463?
That is Chris Straight, Regional Planning. I'm here if there's questions regarding the mitigation plan.
Okay, thank you.
Well, can you hear me? This is Larry.
Yes, we can, Larry.
Thank you.
All right, good evening. It's 7 o'clock, so we can start. Welcome to everybody, all the supervisors and support people, and also all the guests that are watching tonight. It's a Dunn County Board of Supervisors meeting, October meeting. And we will start with the call to order. And our clerk will take that.
Well, let's call the roll.
Or call the roll. I'm sorry.
Supervisor Johnson,
Here.
Chairman Bartlett, Supervisor Headland,
Here.
Supervisor Score, he was here.
He is here.
Yeah. Supervisor Steen,
Here.
Supervisor Zons,
Here.
Supervisor Gary Bjork,
Here.
Supervisor Maves,
Here.
Supervisor Quinn,
Here.
Supervisor Rogers,
Yes, here.
Supervisor Anderson,
Here.
Supervisor Kinnear,
Here.
Supervisor Crumry,
Here.
Supervisor Calabrese,
Here.
Supervisor Keeter, Supervisor, okay. Supervisor Vogel,
Here.
Supervisor McCullough,
Here.
Supervisor Story,
Here.
Supervisor Vandermeulen,
Here.
Supervisor Niehoff,
Here.
Supervisor Morehouse,
Here.
Supervisor Kennedy,
Here.
Supervisor Tripp,
Here.
Supervisor Prochnow,
Here.
Supervisor Jensen,
Here.
Supervisor Larry Bjork,
Here.
Supervisor Bauer,
Here.
Supervisor Leno,
Here.
and Supervisor Hartung. Supervisor Hartung,
All right, we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance. I apologize for reading that wrong. So we'll start with Pledge Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance
to
the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If I could just jump in quick and ask who's calling from the number 1178, so I can just put your name on here.
Melissa Gillenbach.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Approval of the minutes. Has anybody had a chance to look at the minutes?
I so move.
I second.
Second.
I think I got Supervisor Steen moving and Supervisor Story seconding it.
Thank you.
All right. Any discussion on the minutes?
Mr. Chairman, it's Larry.
Yes. Yes, Mr.
I-
Bjork.
I don't
Supervisor
know,
Larry.
I don't know when to ask Mr. Miller, but I'd like to have him go through a little bit again about the health insurance plan and the fund balance and how the two relate to each other? Either now, or I
We,
don't know.
we can do that when we're discussing the budget, because that's part of the budget. All right,
Thank you very much.
okay. Any other discussion on the minutes? If not, all in favor of approving the minutes as printed, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. All right, presentation of petitions, memorials, and other communications. The clerk has one she wants to read.
Would just like to read the petition into the record. So this was done electronically to call this meeting, and it states, due to the timing of the November County Board meeting on the first Tuesday following the Monday after an election, and the requirements for posting the draft county board budget for fiscal year 2021, the county board needs to meet a week earlier in October than regularly scheduled. The county board will need to meet on October 14th, 2020. In order to have a special meeting, a majority of supervisors must sign a petition requesting the meeting. This correspondence is intended to be the required petition. By affirmative response to this email, I hereby request that the Dunn County Board of Supervisors hold a meeting on October 14th, 2020 for the purpose of conducting county business. And it was replied in affirmative by 17 supervisors.
All right. Moving on to appointments this month. You've all received them in an email. ADRC Advisory Committee, appoint to succeed Madonna Hosletter, Carol Kittinger. Fair Board, reappoint Martha Peabody. Transportation Coordinating Committee, appoint to succeed Jan Gearing, Suzanne Gaines. Zoning Ordinance Board of Adjustment, reappoint Tim Lanou and reappoint Patrick McCoy. Those appointments need board confirmation, so I need a motion to that effect.
Move to present as.
Supervisor
approve as
McCullough moves, and who seconded it? Supervisor Steen. Any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Okay. For the Emergency Medical Services Committee, appoint to succeed Jack Bowes, Dennis Class. And the same for the Traffic Safety Commission, appoint to succeed Jack Bowes, Dennis Class. And then for the Veterans Service Commission, appoint to fill the unexpired term of Gary Lauer, Marlon Severson. All right. Thank you. Report of the county manager is next. We'll start with COVID-19 update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everybody. Apologize in advance if I appear very bright. The white mask and the pale skin combines to make me Casper, the friendly county manager. As far as the COVID-19 update here for Dunn County, we are at 491 total positive cases of COVID-19, of which 96 are active. Over the past 7 days, there's a 2-day lag on this reporting, but over the past 7 days, we're at an average of 14.3 positives per day. That's a rate of 31.5 per 100,000 population, which means we remain in the very high category of transmission per Wisconsin. The good news is that our numbers are down. The rate at which we were getting positives has reduced this past week. There's also a shift in the demographics. While the raw numbers indicate that the largest number of positives are still in the younger population group, up to age 25. That percentage in that group is declining. The percentage in the next group, the 26 to 69 group, is climbing, which basically means that while we had a high incidence among some of the younger people, stout students, high schoolers, that's going down now, but the spread is now out into the broader community again. We've been at this for several months. We know that the trends, the rates are going up and down. Things will get better, then they'll go worse. The bottom line is obviously the pandemic is not over, and we should continue to exercise our diligence on our COVID-19 protocols. That's the update on COVID-19, unless there are any questions.
Mr. Miller, you might want to correct your total numbers. You reported 400 and some. I believe we're well over that.
791. Okay. If I misspoke, I apologize. Total is 791. Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, Bauer here, Supervisor Bauer.
Are you muted, Dave?
Have we?
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I don't know if I was muted. Sorry about that. Have we increased the testing from a month ago to 2 months ago? And is that some of the cause of the numbers going up?
No, I don't believe that the incidence of testing has gone up. There are a couple of permanent testing spots that have been established in Eau Claire, and we're talking about one that will be established here, and it will be established here in Dunn County, that will operate every other week. But it's not a consequence from talking with KT Gallagher, our Director of Public Health. It is not a consequence of increased testing.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not,
you're muted again.
If not, if there's no other questions, we'll move on to purchase orders.
For supervisors, in the packet of materials that was delivered to you for this meeting is the purchase orders over $40,000 in value. Taking a look at that list, just to anticipate some questions. The first item to CISA Rex Government Services in the amount of $169,000. The Intercept Security Scanning System is in fact a full body scanner that will be utilized in the Sheriff's Office. It is being purchased with routes to recovery funds, and it will increase safety both for detainees and Sheriff staff by allowing physical separation for body scans. The Highway Department has several purchases over. The loan payment on 5 international quads is a lease to own for our dump trucks. You can see we're making a couple of payments on hot mix. The truck equipment install is putting the plow hardware on a triaxle truck. We've got the advance payment to haul from the transfer station to the landfill, and we're making a purchase of county salt into anticipation of the weather. Any questions on the purchase orders over $40,000?
How many plows were we putting on for 100,000?
Supervisor Rogers? Was that you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it was.
I understand it's just the one, but I may be wrong. I will find out. I will confirm for you, Supervisor Rogers, and get back to you.
I think that is correct, Supervisor Rogers. It's more than just the plow, though. It's the box and everything that goes with it.
Yeah, the full outfit for a plow truck runs around 100, 120, depending on how it's rigged out generally.
Any other questions? If not, we will move on to the reports of committees. And we've got a report from the Executive Committee for the proposed FY 2021 budget and levy. And we will start with CFO Mr. Stry. And we can go have questions after. So go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. County Manager Miller is going to bring up 4 slides that I'll go through. Essentially, I just want to hit the highlights of the information I've provided to you, Executive Committee, met last week. The slide that's up here right now is just an overall summary of the budget that's proposed for 2021. This was included in the agenda packet that went out a week ago. And the highlights from it is the proposed 2021 budget is a reduction of the total county budget of just over $1.2 million. If you look at the first two columns of numbers and compare those two, of 83.9 million to 82.7, that's the decrease overall for the county for all operations. That's driven primarily by solid waste and recycling. If you look up at that individual line and compare the 2 years, 2.9 million down to 370,000 from a fully operating budget to a closure budget. So that's what's driving that. The proposed 21 budget tax levy funding source, which is the column titled 2021 levy, has the county portion of the levy being $22.8 million and is compliant with the levy limit restrictions. If you recall at the beginning, we were well over $1 million over that limit, which is not unusual for initial budgeting because people submit requests based on their preliminary needs. And then of course we go through the process to vet that and prioritize and make adjustments. So I can report that what's presented tonight does comply with the state levy limit and imposed restrictions. If you look at the alternate financing column right next to that, the total of $1.3 million is the proposed borrowing. That is for capital projects. And that is down from over $3 million in what was presented in July. And again, that was going through the process, prioritizing projects, making adjustments to estimates. For example, the most significant change was the cost of the Judicial Center roof project that dropped significantly with further review. And it is also less than the principal we're paying. So we are making progress in reducing our total outstanding debts. Next point is deferred capital project requests to future years was limited to $685,000 in comparison to the 5-year capital improvement requests. During the process and during the budget process here, earlier in March, we talked about implementing a 5-year capital improvement program. And we'll get into later slides here that will show that. But every year there's a list of requests, and with the delays and deferrals, it was adding to the list. So executive factored that into inputs from the committees and was able to reduce that down. At one point, it was more than double that. The general fund was also adjusted to and budgeted to approximately 30% of budgeted expenditures versus the 35% threshold used in previous years. But it is still within recommended 25 to 33% range presented by our audit firm. That is a change, and it allowed us or freed up the capacity for a little over $600,000 in additional funding from fund balance. It's reflective of the times. Our actual percentage at the end of fiscal year 2019 was 38%. So in projecting things forward and looking at things and comparing ourselves to other counties, what thresholds they use, and our audit report, we felt comfortable making that recommendation, and that is what's included. And finally, the overall budgeted fund balance applied, if you look at the purple box, that was $1.57 million. It's approximately $49,000 less than what was initially presented. So when everything was balanced out and prepared, that was it. So those are all the points from this initial sheet. Paul, if you can go to the next page, please. All right, supervisors, I sent this and one other document out earlier today, mid-morning. And this one here is a summary of personnel changes, requested personnel changes. And all I'm doing in the highlighted yellow is updating what has taken place since things were initially presented to you in July. Again, thank you for blowing that up. Actually helps me too. Paul, if you can scroll over so I can see the yellow comments all the way. A little bit more, please.
That's as far as she goes.
Oh, okay, all right. Maybe it's the window tile, sorry.
Can move that window over to the left, I think.
Oh, sure. No,
This is a PDF, so, but the entire text is contained in the notes.
Yep. Essentially, and I'm not going to go through them individually, but the executive committee did take a look at these with input from the standing committees, as well as the county manager and I. And the notable changes on review were the judicial assistant request for the courts was not funded. They were prioritized between that other position, the deputy clerk for the clerk of courts. And it was determined that only one of the two positions could be funded for fiscal year 21. And in fiscal year 22, there'd be consideration of the judicial assistant. That was with input from the judges and the clerk of courts. And this was what was recommended by an executive committee. The E&S director position that was requested was removed. It's a vacant new position. The administrative secretary in the administration department that was proposed to be defunded was funded at a half-time level. Emergency communications, E911, the department did report that based on timing of everything that's going on and realistic hiring date, recommendation was to delay the filling of the vacant telecommuter positions till April 1. So that was a savings there that was factored in. And then the final two lines are two positions that are funded by COVID grants that were received and awarded to the health department. And essentially it's to help with management level tasks, the nurse administrator and WEDS administration to help Katie Gallagher share some of that workload that right now is falling on her and whoever else can assist her. So that is recognizing those additional funds. So Paul, if you can go to the next page, please.
And I need to.
And here's where you'll need to rotate it.
Yes, just a moment. Well, I'd love to if I could figure out how. Here we go. There, is that, everybody see that?
Pass the test. All right. Thank you. This slide presents just the summary information on the capital project financing summary. The information I provided to supervisors earlier today has this as the front page, and then there's a detail page of all the project lists, and it does a comparison of what was presented on July 29th and what's proposed now. Overall, the most significant area or notable item overall is that the decrease was just short of $2.1 million with reviews and deferments. And debt was reduced from $3.2 million in the initial July version down to 1.347. So those are the most notable things. And then Paul, if you want to scroll down just a little bit on that page, those are the projects. Chairman Bartlett wanted to provide everybody with this information of what projects were being financed by debt. And this is the full list. One of the conversation points during executive committee is, does this, if we borrow, is it automatically a 10-year borrowing? And that's not the case. Every time we borrow, we look at the types of items being borrowed for, the amount, market conditions, and other factors, and make a recommendation at this point. I would anticipate with projects along these lines, it's likely we will be able to do a shorter term borrowing, let's say maybe 5 years. And that certainly would be my intent at this point. But again, we need to do that analysis next year. And then if we can go to the final slide, Paul. This last page I sent out in advance of the executive committee, and it's a history going back to 2015 of the mill rate calculations. And if Paul, if you can scroll down to show the bottom. There we go. That's where things are at with the proposed budget. The levy is up $117,000 or 0.5% overall. Equalized value for Dunn County actually went up rather significantly. If you look back over history, this is one of the larger years, at least for the time frame presented, which was a nice thing to have for us. So 6.3%, or $203 million plus, which really results in the fact that our mill rate per $1,000 of value drops by 40 cents. So on a $150,000 home, the county portion of the tax bill drops by $59.74. So that's kind of the end result of what the county's portion of the tax bill that will be going out would look like based on equalized value. Now, I always advise people having collected taxes on the other side, when tax bills go out from municipalities, it's based on assessed value. So depending on where municipalities are at with that ratio of assessed value to equalized, there can be variances. So I just want to be clear and upfront on that. So that was my high level presentation, and certainly I'll open it up for any questions.
Yeah. Very good, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Supervisor Burke.
The 141,000 for ENS director, I kind of missed what that was all about, requested by Paul Miller. What's the ENS director?
A couple of years ago, Supervisor Bjork, the county board approved a new position that would be the department head for the Environmental Services Department. Right now, it consists of 4 divisions, each run by a manager. It is a single department, but has no department head. It was agreed for organizational and operational needs that an ENS director was an appropriate position to create. Unfortunately, since the time that the decision was made that we should have such a position, we haven't had the money to fund it, including this coming year. So I had in the initial request put down, we really need to fill that vacant department head position for Environmental Services Department. But the realities of our fiscal situation made it prudent to defer it for another year.
That answer your question?
Yeah, it really does, but it's sort of like answer the question too, because I had written down EDC, economic development, and assuming that position is being eliminated, the whole, for economic development in Dunn County is being eliminated, but yet we want to spend money to oversee 4 department heads.
Supervisor Bjork, that money, that is not in the budget. It was declined. That position, yes, that position is declined. It is not in the budget. We did not okay that.
Thank you very much. Appreciate
All right.
it.
I just wanted to make sure you understood that. Any other questions on the budget? Supervisor Rogers, go ahead.
So since we have a reduction in the fund balance to 30%. Is that going to be permanent, or are we going to go back up to 33% next year?
That will depend on how much gets put back into the general fund from this year. Mainly it'll be from this year, although it'll depend on what our spending is from next year too, if we end up being under budget or over budget.
I guess my question was, we had a requirement that we maintain 33% prior to this, and we've reduced it down. Are we going to leave that requirement 30%, or are we going to take it back and require 33%?
Clarification, there is no requirement. There's good fiscal policy. What we've been maintaining here in the past couple of years is a fund balance, general fund balance that equals 35% or greater of operating expenses. the fiscal realities are that we can't maintain that unless we cut more. The recommendation from our advisor is between 25 and 33% is average, industry average, between 25 and 33. So we felt comfortable in order to limit the bleeding to reduce the fund balance for 21 to a 30% rather than 35. If, as the chairman said, we do better and we get to save more money, yes, we intend to build that back up because it is, after all, our savings account. But good financial planning and the desire to limit the cuts to our services as much as possible is what led staff to recommend and for the executive committee to endorse the idea of the fund balance being set at 30% for 21.
And I guess I will add, Supervisor Rogers, that you asked if we intend to keep it at that or we want to raise it. That would be totally up to the Board of Supervisors and how we prioritize. If we decide that we think our fund balance should be higher than something else that we are spending our money on, then that would be a decision that would be up to us. But we have levy limits, so we have to stay within those. Are there any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, I add for going forward then, we have a requirement to publish the draft budget that will be published this month in advance of the November 10 meeting of the county board. It's the first Tuesday after an election, after the first Monday after an election. That will be on November 10th. We will have a public hearing on the budget and levy at that time. We intend, just to give you some knowledge here, we do intend to do it remotely, but we will set it up so that people wishing to speak at the public hearing for the budget and levy are able to do so. I'm working with IT, so we'll have a clear procedure that will be included in the notice that we put out for the meeting so that people understand if they do want to make comments at the public hearing, they will be able to do so.
Are there any other questions on the budget? Supervisor Larry Bjork, you did have a question on the health care plan, and I don't want to overlook your questions, but this would be the time to ask that question if you so desire.
Yes, thank you very much. I was just kind of wondering when the right time for that was. I guess, I've heard just conflicting information from board members and county employees as far as how the fund balance is used in relationship to the health insurance premiums, where, one person tells me that health insurance premiums are, money is being put back into enhance the fund. And then I've also been told that the fund has been used to keep health insurance premiums as low as they can. I mean, we're not, the premiums are probably staying the same, but it's the deductibles that seems to be a big item with people. Everyone faces high deductibles, but how does the fund balance have relationship to what we're doing in the increase in health insurance to county employees?
We have two different fund balances, Supervisor Bjork, and one is our general fund balance and the other one is our insurance fund balance. And they are separated completely and have been for many years. If you go back a number of years ago, we were talking about putting some money from the general fund into the insurance fund because it had been dropping and was getting significantly low. And that is happening again. I believe 3 years ago, it was a little over $3 million, and now it's down to just under $1 million. And that is why we have to change our insurance premiums and our deductibles. Mr. Miller, would you like to add anything to that?
Only to the effect of, to echo what the chairman just said. We are self-insured, which means that we have to pay for our own costs, and health costs go up and down as individuals. The numbers of individuals are well or encounter difficulties. Our fund balance for health insurance has been dropping. It is below $1 million now. We need to build it back up. When we got the initial estimate from our health insurance administrator, the estimate was a 20% increase in cost in order to maintain the benefits and the premiums and the co-pays exactly where they were. That 20% would have been passed on almost entirely to the employees, which would have been a significant chop off of their take-home pay. So we worked with the administrator to raise those co-pays, those deductibles, and limit the increase in the costs to just under 8%. It's not what anybody wants to do. We've had a very generous health insurance package. We're simply unable to sustain it. Going forward, we are going to continue to explore alternatives to try to rein in our costs. Ideas include, helping our employees make good purchasing choices, just like you do at the grocery store on their health choices. There we will explore the possibility of near-site clinics. We will explore the possibility of perhaps joining with other organizations and making a larger pool of persons. Everything will be on the table as we continue to struggle with this, but Dunn County is not unique in what it is facing. It is painful to everybody what health insurance is costing us, and we're trying to make the best out of what is admittedly a bad situation.
Are there any other questions on the budget before we move on?
Chairman Bartlett, Supervisor Kinnear
Yes,
here.
Supervisor Kinnear, go ahead.
Thank you. I had a question. I think the new administration position is a human resources assistant. And as I understand right, it's paid for by not filling 2 positions. Is that what it is?
It's by not filling one position in finance and moving another full-time position to half-time.
Okay, so these are just going to be unfunded, but the positions are not going to be eliminated. Is that correct?
That's correct. Unfunded, but not eliminated. There's no change to the organizational chart.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions before we move on? This is the time to ask the questions. So I want to make sure that any questions out there have been asked and answered. I see none, so we will move on then. To item 9, consideration of resolutions, reports, and ordinances from the standing committees. From Judiciary and Law, we have A1 is a resolution adopting the hazard mitigation plan. I need a motion for this. Supervisor Tripp moves. I'm looking for a second. Supervisor Vandermeulen seconds. Speaking to this resolution, Supervisor Tripp, did you want to do that? Or I know that
I will introduce, and then if there are questions, I'll defer to Chris Strait, who is here from West Central Regional Planning, and/or Melissa Gellenbach. But to begin, I would direct your attention to the last sentence in the first paragraph of the background information. What this is an update of the county's natural hazards mitigation plan The purpose is to assess the magnitude of natural hazard risks and then develop strategies for minimizing or reducing these risks. The plan, and I asked somebody recently how old this is, and they told me, and I've forgotten already. But the plan itself goes back several years. Usually the duration of the plan is 4 or 5 years, and Chris Strait can explain exactly what all these things are. But over the course of the past year and a half or so, the Judiciary and Law Committee, and as well as virtually every municipality in the county, has had a chance to take a look at this. Their input was sought on where they saw the hazards, how they prioritized them, the potential hazards, and this plan is the result. So again, I would defer to Melissa Yollenbach and or Chris Strait if there are any questions, or if either of them would like to add to my inadequate introduction.
Are there any questions first off? I don't see any questions. Supervisor Anderson, do you have a question? All right. You're just waving to me. Thank you. Any questions at all? If not, hearing no questions, then we'll go ahead and vote on this. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
I'm sorry, was I too soon?
Yes.
All right, now opposed. All right, resolution passes. Moving on to 9A2, it's an ordinance amending the county code, chapter 11. It's the first reading. I need a motion for this. Supervisor Tripp moves.
Two.
And Supervisor Bauer seconds. And speaking to this, Supervisor Tripp, do you want to do that, or would you rather have somebody else?
I can introduce it, and the sheriff can do further explanation and answer questions. Basically, the only part of the ordinance that this changes is the calendar time period when ATVs and UTVs are allowed on county roads. There's already all kinds of regulations about speed and exactly what sections of the road they're allowed on, times of use, etc. So this only changes one thing, and that's that the new ordinance would allow these vehicles, where they are now allowed on county roads, to extend year-round instead of the restricted use that was in the previous in the ordinance previously. Currently, the ordinance says that they are prohibited between December 1st and April 1st, and that prohibition on those months would be removed. The sheriff can explain further, I'm sure, but basically it's an effort to get the municipal, the township ordinances and the county ordinances to correspond. Right now, if a deputy is out on parole and sees an ATV, UTV in certain places, they have to take a look at a map and make sure they know exactly which township they're in so that they can be sure and enforce the law appropriately. And with that, I'll either turn it over to the sheriff if he has any comments, or entertain questions, which I will also deflect to the sheriff.
Are there any questions? Supervisor Vandermeer.
I'm just wondering if this is safe when there's a lot of snow and high snowbanks along roads at intersections. Generally, people would be looking for something the size of a car or a truck, and I would guess these vehicles would be much lower.
Sheriff, would you like to answer that, or should I try to?
Well, I guess I can try and cover that. ATVs and UTVs required to operate on the trails are required to operate with headlights on. There certainly could be some visibility issues with regular ATVs, but that's not probably what we're going to be seeing operating between December 1st and April 1st because they're awful chilly to ride during that time of the year. So the UTVs are the side-by-sides are significantly larger. In some cases, probably larger than some of the small vehicles out there.
I guess I could add to that the UTV, the ones we're going to see are probably going to be mainly UTVs, and they'll probably be something that people are using for plowing snow. UTVs all have a roll bar cage assembly, so they are actually taller than most regular cars. Any other questions?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Supervisor Tripp.
I have a question for the sheriff, and that is in this effort to coordinate the statutes, which is understandable and desirable. Do all of the municipalities in Dunn County, all of the townships, have they coordinated now on these rules, or will we still have some discrepancies, some differences?
One of my sergeants, Travis Mayer, has been working with the Towns Association to try and get everybody on the same page with their ordinances. Colfax Township, for example, ended up going with a 24-hour operation instead of daylight to dark. But most of the townships have been open their town roads to 365 days a year. So we're just trying to get in. There was a vote taken at the Towns Association, and the Towns Association voted to move forward with 365 operations. So we're getting close. There's some townships that have ordinances that are allowing 24-hour operation, but we're not recommending that on county roads at this time. If they allow that on their town roads, they can only do that during hours of darkness. There were some other questions posed to the Towns Association that they voted down. One being increasing speed limits over 35 miles an hour and going with the speed limit of the roadway, which in most cases on a town road is 55 miles an hour. That was voted down to keep that at 35 miles an hour along with the state statute. And Mr. Chairman would probably have to remind me of the third one that was voted down, but this was the only thing voted to move forward was a request to allow Operation 365.
Supervisor McCullough.
I might add that we had a discussion about this at the Highway Committee today, since we normally are involved in ATV stuff, ATV, UTV, and John Swirsky, our highway director, was comfortable with the safety issues with going to 365 days. Just so the highway committee is also on board with that. I thought you would be a useful information.
All right, Supervisor Bjork.
A question for the sheriff. As far as operating a UTV, the speed limit and stuff like that, are points assessed or assessed like your regular driving license for an automobile or not? And I mean, I know that you can't drink and drive that. How about what's the punishment for speeding? If going 55. I mean, I see so many of them out there along 53 going north to Superior in Barron County in particular. And there's a lot of them going as fast as those Walmart trucks running north. So,
right. Well, and that it may be applicable to that trail that the speed limit, maybe unlimited speed limit on that trail. But to answer your question, there's no points assessed along with your regular driver's license. Two completely different worlds. One's, Wisconsin Department of Transportation applies to your driver's license. The other's a DNR violation. It's more in line with a violation of a hunting law than it is a driving law with the roadway. So an OWI and a UTV are side by side, and or an ATV does not go on your driving record right now. Neither does a snowmobile or a boat.
Any other questions?
Very interesting.
Supervisor Kinnear. Supervisor Kinnear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I intend to support this, but I just find it interesting that we're looking to make all of the ordinances the same across the county, whereas we're complaining that the state legislature is doing that for the entire state, saying, hey, we're all the same. And of course, all our townships aren't the same. But I intend to support it, but it's just interesting we're looking at the same thing on a smaller level.
That's an interesting point of view. Any other questions? All right, this is the first reading. So we will see this back next month. So moving on to 9B, Executive Committee, FY20 budget adjustment for the county clerk. And I need a motion for this. Supervisor Headland moves, Supervisor Crumry seconds. Speaking to the resolution, Supervisor Headland. And you are muted.
Okay, am I okay?
There you are.
All right. This is a budget adjustment. There was a grant awarded to our county clerk. And this is to accept that grant and to spend it on the items that the grant was presented for. So it's not going to increase the taxes, but it is going to change the budget.
Any questions on this? I see no questions. This will be a roll call vote. And the clerk will call the roll.
Supervisor Quinn?
Yes.
Supervisor Quinn recorded as yes. Supervisor Rogers?
Yes.
Supervisor Rogers recorded as yes. Supervisor Score?
Yes.
Supervisor Score recorded as yes. Supervisor Steen?
Yes.
Supervisor Steen recorded as yes. Supervisor Story?
Yes.
Supervisor Story recorded as yes. Supervisor Tripp?
Yes.
Supervisor Tripp recorded as yes. Supervisor Vandermeulen?
Yes.
Supervisor Vandermeulen recorded as yes. Supervisor Vogel?
Yes.
Supervisor Vogel recorded as yes. Supervisor Zons?
Yes.
Supervisor Zons recorded as yes. Supervisor Anderson?
Yes.
Supervisor Anderson recorded as yes. Supervisor Bauer?
Yes.
Supervisor Bauer recorded as yes. Supervisor Gary Bjork?
Yes.
Supervisor Gary Bjork recorded as yes. Supervisor Larry Bjork?
Yes.
Supervisor
Yes.
Larry Bjork recorded as yes. Supervisor Calabrese?
Yes.
Supervisor Calabrese recorded as yes. Supervisor Hartung? He was absent. Supervisor Headland?
Yes.
Supervisor Headland recorded as yes. Supervisor Jensen?
Yes.
Supervisor Jensen recorded as yes. Supervisor Johnson?
Yes.
Supervisor Johnson recorded as yes. Supervisor Kennedy?
Yes.
Supervisor Kennedy recorded as yes. Supervisor Kinnear?
Yes.
Supervisor Kinnear recorded as yes. Supervisor Crumry?
Yes.
Supervisor Crumry recorded as yes. Supervisor Keeter?
Yes.
Supervisor Keeter recorded as yes. Supervisor Lenow?
Yes.
Supervisor Lino recorded as yes. Supervisor Maves.
Yes.
Supervisor Maves recorded as yes. Supervisor McCullough.
Yes.
Supervisor McCullough recorded as yes. Supervisor Morehouse.
Yes.
Supervisor Morehouse recorded as yes. Supervisor Niehoff.
Yes.
Supervisor Niehoff recorded as yes. Supervisor Prochnow.
Yes.
Supervisor Prochnow recorded as yes. Chairman Bartlett.
Yes.
Chairman Bartlett recorded as yes.
All right. It passes. Announcements. Are there any announcements? If
Only again to reiterate, the meeting date for November is the special meeting date, November the 10th.
right, a Tuesday, not a Wednesday. Anything else? If not, we're adjourned. Thank you for all coming. And
Thank
we
you.
will